Hey guys, if you're looking to order custom team apparel for this freestyle and Greco season, look at SpartanCombat.com. They're running a special right now on custom team apparel, whether it's for Fargo, the NHSCA duels, or your freestyle and Greco state. Please consider Spartan Combat. Go to SpartanCombat.com to place your order.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestle, because if you wrestle, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if they gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Welcome back to Wrestling Changed My Life. This is your host, Ryan Warner. It's so good to be back. I feel like it's been forever since we've had a normal episode. Last Monday, we dropped all 3 episodes of our most recent audio documentary, Escape from Inglewood. The response has been phenomenal. Thank you, everyone who listened, who sent a tweet, sent a message, sent a text. It really means a lot to know that these stories are well received. This episode is with Rollie Peterkin. Raleigh is a former wrestler for Penn. He's a retired MMA fighter who used to fight down in Peru. Now he's a traveling nomad. He's a good friend of mine, and he helps me with the story consulting on these audio docs. So he's probably the only person other than me that knows what we go through to make these audio documentaries. And in this episode, Raleigh comes on, interviews me a little bit. We talk about Escape from Inglewood, and we talk about what's next in the documentary pipeline. So I hope you enjoy it. Fan of the week goes to our friend Ty Seaman from Storm Lake, Iowa. Recently purchased a Wrestling Changed My Life t-shirt, so thank you very much, Ty. We greatly appreciate it. If you want to purchase merchandise, go to store.wrestlingchangemylife.com. Now that's it, folks. Let's give it up for Rollie Peterkin. Rollie Peterkin, welcome back to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast, my friend.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy to be here. We talk all the time, and it's so great to see you again and to chat about the amazing projects you're working on and all of this stuff. It's been such a pleasure. And so, yeah, let's get into it for sure.
Yeah. And folks who listen to the audio documentaries, we just released Escape from Inglewood on Monday. Raleigh and I worked together during the last month of these projects in what I call the story consulting phase. And Raleigh and I are on the phone daily, really from the last month on, from when the editing begins to when you guys hear it. So usually it starts with me sending Raleigh a message saying we're ready for the next project. And I start sending him rough cuts, and then we get on the phone and hash it out. So you're probably the only person who knows these stories the level that I do. So it's always fun to be able to hash it out with these. It's been a week, Raleigh. How are you feeling about things, brother?
No, I'm great. I'm so excited that people are getting a chance to hear this story. You know, like when we were going into it, one of the things at the kind of beginning of the process, I didn't know the story as well. You know, some of the other ones we worked on, Brandon Slay, Saitiev, and Smiths, you know, like I learned so much throughout the process, but you know, I knew the general story arc, and this one was a new one to me, and it was so much fun to work on. And you know, I think it speaks to you that you found this kind of diamond in the rough and found this story and put it out there in the world. And in a way, this one feels a little bit more like kind of journalism than the rest, where it's like you really nurtured this story and brought it to life. And so, you know, I just kind of like, I want to get into, you know, your background with this story. This is a little more personal for you than the other ones, coming from Illinois. This is a true Illinois story from the heartland, from Chicago. And talk a little bit about your background with this story. What you grew up idolizing these guys when you're a kid wrestling. You were looking up to guys like Tony Davis and TJ Williams. And so talk about that.
Yeah. So growing up where I did in Illinois, Western Illinois, 3 hours west of Chicago, whenever we would go to tournaments in the Chicagoland area, these teams would they'd be in matching warm-ups, and they would psych you up before you even got there. And so when you add in the Harvey Twisters, this legendary club, it was like that times 10. I mean, we were like these farm kids coming up to these tournaments, just excited to be there. And then these guys would roll in. The Twisters would be 40 deep, matching red jumpsuits. And it was just like another level of intensity. And once you started to see that world, you're like, all right, there's levels of this. And then it's like, as you get down to state for the first time as a middle schooler, you look in the program and you see who are the 2-time champs or 3-time champs. And there was this special section of 5-time champs. And at the time there were 2 of them, Tony Davis and Israel Martinez. And so, growing up with my fascination for the Twisters and then kind of sorting out who's the most legendary Twister, this Tony Davis name came about. And literally, like I said in the documentary, from my early days in middle school wrestling all the way through high school, you would hear this name kind of in a mythical guy. You'd hear about him in the hallways or hear about him warming up, and you never really knew what the story was. Why did he only wrestle at state 2 years in high school? What was going on with, his life after wrestling? And so it was always just a big question mark to me. And I found out a lot of the times the best results are just following your curiosity. And so this was just a story that fascinated me. And not just the wrestling, the part about living in a very dangerous neighborhood and that kind of side of life, just, I don't know, it's intriguing. And this story kind of tied it all in. So it's definitely personal to me.
I guess you probably never, he was a bit older, so you probably never interacted with him in those days. And so what was it like when you finally were sitting in front? I guess you interviewed him on the podcast first, and then you actually were sitting in front of him for this documentary. And so what must that have been like for you?
It was exciting because I've never met him in person until this December. And so when I called Tony to pitch the story to him, it was October, and it was kind of 30-minute call. The call ended, and I'm like, I don't know if this guy realized what he just signed up for, that we're going to go all in on this. And so that was mid-October. And then by the time I met him in December, he's like, man, people are calling me. You're interviewing this guy, that guy. And so when I finally flew out there to North Carolina to interview him, it was, I was definitely nervous. And it doesn't matter who I'm interviewing. Anytime it's in person, it's just another level of nerves. But it was awesome. He was the coolest guy ever. He actually had to teach a private wrestling class. So I got to his house about 5. He had to teach a private wrestling class out of his garage for an hour and a half. I went back to the hotel. He came over to my hotel. We did the interview for about 2 hours. And then I flew back a month later, the day after Christmas, and did another interview for about an hour and a half. And that one was we were old friends. The nerves were gone, but it was incredible just to sit down with him and just to see how open he was. I was just blown away by how much he was willing to share and, what levels he was willing to go to on some of the stuff.
You were saying how he was kind of surprised about how all in you were. And, I think that's something that I was surprised too from the beginning when we first started working on the Smiths. And, because you meet a lot of people that are like, yeah, I'm going to do this project or whatever. But when you do something, you really do go all in. I mean, you flew to Amarillo, Texas to interview Slay's childhood friends, and you're going all over the place, finding the right voice actor for Saitiev.
That was insane.
I was just that's a different story. But
so that was Raleigh's friend, folks. The person who played Saitiev in episode 2 of Slaying Saitiev. I had gone through several voice actors on Fiverr, and Raleigh's friend Vlad came through for the rescue. Unbelievable.
I just was showing my mom that the other day. I was like, hey, Vlad has this Russian accent he can do, and played it. And we had a good laugh. But yeah, so you're just going so all in on these episodes and doing it so professional. You just jump right into it. And so talk a little bit about your process with that.
Yeah, so I'm definitely an obsessive person, and it's good for me to have outlets for like things to obsess on in 4 to 6 month increments. So anytime I do one of these, there's kind of definitive stages that I follow. This first stage is just research, and that's usually about a month, where I spend 4 to 5 weeks just Googling, reading anything I can on the person or the world that we're going to be living in throughout the story. And then it's a process of doing interviews. And for like this one, interviews started the second week in November and they wrapped up the end of December. And so that's something where it's like, maybe I did a trip to Omaha because his junior college coaches were an hour north, and then Coach Manning at Nebraska was right there. So that's a week. And then another week, maybe I'll do his family and his Chicago friend. So, 7 to 8 weeks of interviews. And then the real process begins, because I always set the story out before the interviews start. Like, I know that what the episodes are going to be, what the turning points are going to be, but then you get into the interviews and you learn so much more that you have to, change the structure.
Oh, that must be wild. Yeah.
It's so crazy. And then like the process of uploading all those interviews, each one's about an hour. And for this one, I did 20 interviews, uploading them to a tool called Descript, and it transcribes all of them. So to text. And then I read them all.
I use that too. Yeah.
Unbelievable. And then the last big phase is the script writing. Write out the script for episode 1, 2, and 3, revise it. And then I give you a call, and it's about the editing. And, by the time we're editing, I have a couple things that have to be done. The script has to be done. All the interviews need to be cleaned and like professionally, like background noise removed. And then the other thing is the music. So this time I ordered 4 new songs, and the last time I ordered new songs was for the Smiths. So kind of like day one of editing, I have all those things in different bins, the music, I have the script, I have the interviews, and then all the archival I'm going to use. And then it's just kind of starting at episode 1, and I'm recording the narration as I edit. So I might clip 3 pieces, record the narration, clip 3 more, and then keep going until you're at the end of each episode. So it's about 7 months total.
I mean, it's super impressive. Even me seeing it from the inside, sometimes it's so impressive, the amount of work and diligence that it comes into it. And I remember you telling me that you were like a really distracted student and everything like that. And then I'm like, how do you have the focus to really, like, I mean, you're seeing it through from start to finish, and the kind of commitment to, bite off this huge project and not take these baby steps. You're really committing to it. And like, I don't know. This is just something I'm curious about, like what the Ryan Warner story. How do you get this focus?
It's like I said, it comes back to being obsessive. And if, I wasn't the best high school student because I wasn't that into the topic, but once I got to college and I could really pick what I liked, I would go all in on it. And so I really enjoyed that. It's like, if you find something you're interested in, I'm all in on it. And these stories take so long, these audio docs, like anywhere from 6, 7, 8 months, that if you're not just in love with the topic, you're going to get tired of it, because there's multiple points throughout that 7-month process where you're kind of wanting to try a new project, or something comes on your plate and you like to do it, but you can't because you have 4 months left with this. So to me, it's just like finding these topics that actually interest me. And that's how I get obsessive on things. And, maybe school wasn't that interesting to me at given times. And yeah, I was just a terrible reader, by the way. I had to get a lot better. I had to get a lot better at reading, but yeah, now it's just
I also couldn't read till I was like 9 or something like that. Like I was also an ADD kid. So yeah.
Yeah. So I went to junior college for 2 years, didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then I went to a Division III college and ended up getting a degree in philosophy. And the only reason I did that was because I didn't have a history degree, which I wanted to just get a history major because I thought history was cool.
Now it makes more sense. Yeah.
So I was obsessed with history. And then,
yeah, I mean, we love talking about anytime, when you get into Saitiev and the Chechnya and Dagestan, and here you have Chicago, and you get these other stories coming in. Yeah. And it's something that I know when we're talking about, we both always get really excited about these kind of other stories. So it makes sense you're into history.
Yeah. And I, that kind of started in my junior year of college. And then I get into philosophy, and it's like an independent study where it's just me and the teacher, basically. And he'd give me a text to read, I'd read it, break it down, and write a paper on it. And so that process of research is where it started. And that's basically still the same stuff I'm doing now, like researching a topic like crazy, and then kind of forming your opinion on how it goes. And right about this time in college, when I got into philosophy and like got excited about learning, I got into documentaries, and I was just obsessed with documentaries. And so that kind of started around the same time.
So I know that you love documentaries and specifically 30 for 30. What is your favorite 30 for 30 episode?
Man, I would say,
or one that's inspired you, one that really, like, was there one when you kind of said like, oh, this is cool, I want to do something like this? Like, was there one that really hit the spot there?
I love a couple of them. I love Fab 4, or Fab 5, excuse me, which is about the Michigan basketball team in like the 90s when it was all freshmen. First time 4 freshmen who were African-American started, and they were just like dominant. And then it came out that they were doing recruiting violations. So it was like a great rise and a big fall. So that one's really good. I love the Coach Calipari one, which is One and Not Done, about this phenomena of like college players going to play basketball in college for 1 year, then going pro, and how this one coach kind of embraced it. So those are 2 of my favorites, but by far and away, I mean, The Last Dance is like unbelievable. The Last Dance is so freaking good. And this director who did that also did Fab 5, which is the Michigan basketball story.
Okay.
So
yeah, I remember we talked about that a lot, especially I think when we were kind of still newer to the game doing the Smiths. That was kind of a touchstone for us. I think like it was kind of helped us develop the language and the kind of the infrastructure, the structure to deal with it. You know, I'd say to you like, oh, you know, in the Michael Jordan they did this or that, you know, it was like it was something that, and I know it definitely inspired you. And yeah, it's kind of one of those things that it's so cool because it's like any good sports story. I mean, any good sports story is not just the guy wins and he loses. It's about more than that. It's about the human. It's about the environment that he grows up in, he or she grows up in, the historical context, the all of these things. And so that's why I think that this Tony Davis documentary that we just did was so special, is that, you know, he's an NCAA champion, he's an amazing wrestler, he's a stud. There's a lot of great wrestlers out there though, but his story was just so unique, you know, coming from inner city Chicago, gang violence and all of these things. And so, you know, it was definitely a difficult story to tell. It's difficult. It poses its own challenges, right? You have racial issues, you have violence, and all of this complex story of this rise and fall. It's almost Shakespearean. And so, you know, talk about some of the difficulties that you faced in telling the story.
My big thing was, this was like the first story we told that wasn't really a wrestling story. Like the Smiths was a wrestling story. Slaying Saitiev was about a wrestling match. This was almost as much about inner city Chicago life and making it out of the, you know, whatever environment you're in, kind of, as you say, a coming to age story, as much as it was wrestling a side story. And so I was really nervous that episode 2 would be like, is there enough wrestling in this? Because episode 1,
that's my favorite.
Me
episode
too.
2 is my favorite.
Episode 2 might be the most favorite one we've ever done.
That's the best. I like when I listened to it, I'm supposed to give you notes on it, and I just wanted to listen to it. I just wanted to hear what's happening next. I just listened to it again. It was just such a pleasure. I mean, not, it's a crazy story, but it's riveting.
Yeah, it is. And it's like, so that was a big piece of it. As I'm writing it, I'm thinking like, are people even going to care about this? Like, this is a wrestling podcast. Why? But obviously that's, you know, when you're in the depths of it, you're doubting yourself, you're self-loathing. Like, you don't think anyone's going to like it. So, you know, of course I go through some of those internal doubts, but definitely just the fact that, again, to me, this was more than a wrestling story. It kind of reminded me of the 30 for 32 Escobars. Have you ever seen that?
I think I saw those all so long ago. What's it about?
So this one is about the Colombian national team's best player was an Escobar, and like the big money guy on the team was Pablo Escobar. And through all this drug money, Colombia became one of the best teams in the world. And at the World Cup, the Escobar player actually kicked a ball into his own goal, and they lost the game, and he ended up getting murdered by the cartel. So it's a crazy story. I mean, that part doesn't go down to the Tony Davis, but it just reminded me, like, half the documentary is this cartel drug lord story. And that fascinates me. And just like, I hope this, you know, inner city life story kind of fascinates people, because it's like, I don't think anyone has any idea how harsh it is to grow up in some of these communities in the United States. And like what people go through is just like so inspiring. And like this story really is like the definition of how did wrestling change your life? Like this is like a perfect example of that. And because of that inspiration, like the hard parts of the story weren't as daunting because it just seemed like this is something that I've been dying to tell, you know, this kind of Chicago story. The other thing that was daunting, I would say, is because where I'm from, like the Twisters hold such a place of on the shelf awesomeness that like I wanted to make sure to the Illinois people that I did Coach Quint right, that I did the Twisters right, that when you walk away from this, even if you've never been to the Illinois Kids State Tournament, you can get an appreciation for how special they are, because it's just like, it's hard to describe unless you're from Illinois. And so I didn't want any Illinois homers to be like, bro, you freaking, you barely touched on the Twisters. What was that about? So I had to balance that.
Isn't it funny how when you do any, you know, whether it's writing or any stuff, you always have these imaginary audience in your head, right?
Yeah.
Like you have, and there's always, for me, there's always like certain people, you know, I think like, what would this person say? What would this person say? What would this person say? Who is your kind of imaginary audience in your head when you're doing this?
Oh, there's a couple. Definitely. You're definitely one, because whenever I'm in a spot where like, I feel like the match is going on too long, I'm like, Raleigh would want this half as long. Like, don't even like get out of the match sooner. So like whenever it's an action sequence, I'm thinking about you. When it's funny because a lot of times it's not even wrestling people, because I want these to be listened to by someone who's never seen a wrestling match and still enjoy it. So a lot of times it'll be like, all right, this buddy who I hang out with who has no idea about wrestling. Like I send him these podcasts and he likes them. So I'm like, man, what would he care about the Montrose Classic tournament? No, get it out. Like this, would he care about the weight class? Maybe keep it in, you know? So a lot of times I think about people who are just buddies of mine who I respect what they do, and I want them to love wrestling as much as I do. And so I hope that by sending them these stories, they start to get an appreciation for it and they can understand it.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people like randomly, I'm traveling or something, and I say, oh, did you see The Last Dance? And they say, no, I don't like basketball. I'm like, I don't like basketball either. Like, I don't like, there's nothing about basketball. I'm like, but it doesn't matter because it's again, as going back to what we said before, it's a human story. It's a human, the life of a person and getting into that. And yeah, I mean, like, obviously, you know, wrestling's a little bit different. It's a little more of a kind of inner circle kind of sport.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we have to kind of err a little bit more on the side of that, but it's, no, I think it's really great to find that balance and to have those different people. And I think that's why these stories resonate with so many people. And, you know, just personally, like, I think I'm not someone that follows the minute by minute wrestling of who said what and who's going what weight and all this stuff, but I always enjoyed your podcast. I think that's one of the reasons why, because you are really focused on the human side of it and the kind of quirks of it. And actually that's one of when we're editing these episodes, anytime there's like, you know me, like I love the quirky things. If it's like the scene of John Smith in Philadelphia at what fast food chain were they at? Some fast food chain.
I was wondering which one you were gonna say. Yeah.
But anyway, like all these like weird little like quirky things. I'm like, leave it in. It's great. Some weird detail about them, you know?
Yeah. It's funny you say that because there's so many of those moments, and I'd like to just get your thoughts. Here are a couple of mine that stick out. Like one of the weirdest moments that I uncovered totally by chance was during the Smiths when we found out that John Smith and Randy Lewis were playing poker in Vegas, and John Smith was calling him out for not being able to make weight. Like that was one that maybe it wasn't as like non-wrestling quirky, but it was just so like bizarre that happened. And like the amount of times things line up in real life that you couldn't even write about like that, it just blows my mind. Like the fact that John Smith wrestled Randy Lewis when Randy Lewis beat his brother 4 years before, so many of these coincidences just come into play, or like Brandon Slay having the relationship with Dave Schultz and then representing the Dave Schultz Wrestling Club at the Olympics. It's just like freaking wild, man, how all these things come around like that.
Yeah. And I love those scenes too, because they're so visceral. They're so like, you can imagine John Smith and Randy Lewis sitting next to each other at a poker table. Like it's a scene. It's a real thing. It's like in your head. Yeah. And you think like, you can see him cracking a smile and busting his balls or whatever it is, you know, they have that kind of thing. and that's super cool. And there were like, I mean, a lot of those, like with in this recent one with Tony Davis, you know, talking to his family, his brothers, his mom had some colorful commentary. she was a feisty one. She was great. And
you can make a couple t-shirts out of Lolita Davis quotes. At least, man. Man, what did you think about TJ Williams? Did you know him at all before this story?
I knew the name, and he was always like this guy. And if you asked me about TJ Williams, I would said, yeah, he's probably a 2-time NCAA champ or something. You know, like I knew he was a good wrestler, but I didn't know the details of him. And again, it's a little ahead of our time, and it's kind of like you always know those names. And it was so cool getting to know him. He seems like such a humble, great guy. I mean, and Tony too. Like, the two of them are just humble. And I'm telling you, man, listening to it, you just get chills. I mean, well, I hope everyone listening to this podcast has already listened to that. But you know, like when they wrestled in the finals, and that's why I'm saying spoiler alert. But when they wrestled in the finals, you know, and you know, they say I love you to each other after the match and everything. It was just like, you just get such chills. And then, I mean, even when Tony loses to Reggie Wright in the States, and TJ says that he cried too, and then he went out there and he wrestled. And it's just like, man, like you said before, you couldn't write this stuff. Like you couldn't, this is like I mean, they should make a movie of it. This is like a nice drama. Like you have all the component parts to it. So,
and how about Reggie Wright being Tony's only loss his senior year, out of the way to Okie State? Like that never died out. Like Reggie and Tony were going right down to the end. And then when they wrestled in JUCO, when he's like, I thought I saw a ghost. That to me is like the craziest part of this. Oh my God, bro. It's just so many angles like that.
Yeah, when because it's before social media, like we talked about this, right? Yeah. It's before, like nowadays it would be posted on Flow and it would be a thing, and you'd see his Instagram update of here's where I'm wrestling and blah blah blah. But then like it's so crazy because Tony Davis disappeared for 18 months, and then Reggie Wright just sees him at a JUCO tournament and is like, I thought I saw a ghost, you know. And he's like, man, he's not in my bracket. And he goes and checks, and he's saying he is. And they had these battles, and like, I mean, Reggie Wright I knew too. Yeah, like I was more in the Okie State sphere, and I didn't know his. You know, there's so much, you know, and it just makes me think like there's so many more of these stories to uncover. Like this is just one, and like I wish we could do one of these every month or whatever, and dig into them. Like there's so many more. I mean, of course, like there's the, you know, there's the big ones, and Flo's done a bunch of them or whatever, but like you just think how many other stories like this are there out there, you know?
Like not millions, but thousands. I really think there are so many, and it's like you have to have the right piece, just the right things coming together. Like for this one, we got lucky because there was a lot of archival from the Kid State tournament and from the Illinois High School State tournament. They recorded everything back then, so that was like really nice to have that.
And archival, for people that don't know, is like the announcers talking at like a wrestling match. So you have the like, up on mat 3 is Joe Smith, you know,
right,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, and that's like, to me, that's some of my favorite part is weaving in that old original audio from like the Kid State tournament or, you know, whatever it's from. And like I was worried because we didn't have any archival from the JUCO stuff, so that I was a little worried that might be a little dry there.
I didn't even notice that.
See, yeah. How about the fact that a buddy of mine who listened to it, he texted me, never watched a wrestling match in his life. He's actually a trader, retired trader. He's like, I had no idea that Brock Lesnar was like in those same circles, like actual wrestler. Like that's just another crazy tie-in, right? I mean, go ahead.
No, so there was one thing that we actually cut out of the final documentary, and I want to give you a chance to talk about it now, is how many of these guys were in JUCO at the time. Tell me about this. Like, tell me about this. You said it was the goal. So we
era of like the JUCO transfer.
We didn't have like a lot of space for it, and we need to make it a little snappier. So like, let's talk about that now. Like that was insane. I mean, you had Brock Lesnar, Daniel Cormier. I mean, just tell me about it. You're
it's like expert. Yeah, they call it the era of the JUCO transfer, and that was going to be like its own kind of scene and theme of the story because you had Tony and TJ, obviously Reggie Wright, Brock Lesnar, Jameel Kelly, Mark Munoz, Daniel Cormier. I mean, so Munoz, DC, and Cormier. I'm sorry, Munoz, Jamil Kelly, and DC all went to
Also,
Oklahoma State.
Mo Lawal too, right?
Mo
Was he a few years later though? He might have been a few years later.
He might have been. I'm not exactly sure his time, but I mean that's just another guy. I had a note card of all the guys who came out, and it's like Cain Velasquez. Not too long after, it's just crazy how much talent was in JUCO back then. And then you look at the 2000 era, all those same dudes who won titles at Iowa Central, instead of going Division I, they just went UFC. Like
John Jones, Colby, right?
John Jones, Colby, and Kane. They all won national titles at Iowa Central or were in the finals. Went on to UFC and were like some of the best that's ever done it. You know, it's like
so these guys just didn't have the grades to.
Right.
I mean, they're obviously top recruits, all these guys, but they didn't have the grades to get into these schools. So they had to go spend a few years there and then transfer. It's so crazy. Like just because of like something like grades, they sacrificed like a few years of D1 eligibility. But I mean, again, it worked out for them. Like they all like you can't say, it's a shame that Daniel Cormier wound up well,
think about
it worked out for them.
Like if you were at the 98 JUCO Nationals, there were 2 future Olympians there, Jamil Kelly and DC. I mean, that right there is just ridiculous. I mean,
Jamil Kelly was never an All-American too at D1, right? Like,
right.
And then he's a silver medalist. Like that's a crazy story too. I mean, like,
well, Reggie Wright, TJ Williams, and Jamil were all on that same team.
All those guys at Okie State, and like Daniel Cormier. I mean, like the guy has a crazy story. I mean, like you could do a whole documentary on DC and his wrestling days. I mean, he's now this like mega superstar in the UFC, but like, I mean, what a story that guy has, you know?
Unbelievable. And he's one of the guys who first, when it was at the 04 Olympic trials, I've told the story a bunch, but I was a freshman in high school and it was my birthday present. My birthday's May 31st. So my mom drove me to Indianapolis for the 04 trials. And there was when DC made it for the first time. Kale went 3 matches with Lee Fullhart. Like it was just a great trials. And so that was the first time I saw DC, and it was unbelievable. Like really short guy, had great combat speeds, black and red. And he was like, they had in like the Gator Wrestling Club was big. So they all had like the Gator on their singlet. It was just badass. And it's like, man, those guys are awesome. And Oklahoma State was the best at that time. And so every guy's obsessed with John Smith. So I was obsessed with John Smith. And so
of course,
all those they had in 04, Oklahoma State had 3 Olympians, and
2005 too. They had 5 champs. Was that the?
At the Nationals. Yeah. That's like,
NCAs. Yeah.
They were rolling. And so, so I, really was fascinated with DC, and then 08, everyone was kind of shocked that he didn't make weight. And then, he goes on to be a global superstar in UFC. And I just remember an article I read probably like 10 years ago that, after 08, DC was down and out and like totally depressed, broke, way overweight, living in a studio apartment in Stillwater, and then got his start in UFC or in MMA and went all the way. So it's just like, what a story.
Yeah. Again, as we said before, there's stories everywhere, and that would be an amazing one to do, huh? Like to get to do DC. I mean, the global superstar that he is now, and I mean, he's my favorite. He's my favorite too in the UFC. His personality is amazing, and I remember like from my perspective, I was at Okie State camp when I was a kid, and dude, it was crazy. You just said Mark Munoz. I remember Mark Munoz. I was just telling my dad this the other day. He picked us up at the airport. He was like the shuttle driver. Mark Munoz picked us up to bring us back home. DC was my counselor, my direct counselor, and so he used to call me Rowley. He'd be like, "Hey, Rowley." And I saw him a few years ago at a UFC event, and he came up and he's like Raleigh Peterkin. So,
dude,
I love.
He's a special guy, man. He's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I mean, given the history with John Smith documentary and everything like that, that was the Smiths. That was such a classic. I wonder if he's listened to it.
I hope so. I hope he has. DC, we're coming for you, big dog, wherever you're at out there. I tell you, I look back at the Smiths. Obviously, is like a landmark thing this podcast did, and you had a big part in it. I don't know if there's a cooler guy to interview than Pat Smith. Like one of the nicest, just guard down guys you'll ever meet in your entire life.
The whole family, really, though.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's just how they are. They're just kind of good old boys, like Oklahoma, very sincere, very genuine, very authentic. I mean, that's just how I mean, John Smith was a great interview too. All of them, it was amazing. And yeah, that was fun, man. I was thinking about before, by the way, to make it a little bit about me for a second.
Yeah.
When
please.
we did the Smiths, I was in Costa Rica. When we did the Slaying Saitiev, I was in Spain, I think. And when we did this Escape from Englewood, I was in Turkey. So we did them from 3 different countries. I just remember when you first sent me that Smiths episode and was like, "You have any notes?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, I got a lot." And you're
I didn't even know we'd start working together at that point. Like I sent you that message, and then next thing you know, we're partners now, and we're knocking these things out. It's awesome. And I as you said that, I kind of forgot. I knew you were close to Oklahoma State from your friendship with Kendall, but I forgot also that like the Slaying Saitiev story was pretty close to home with you as well, being a Penn guy. So like that's kind of random.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're Roger Reyna and everything, who I've known since I was a kid. Like all these guys, Clint Motter, all these guys. Yeah, it's kind of lucky, but I mean, it's kind of the wrestling world is just a small world in general. So actually, this Escape from England was the first one where I had I had literally no connection. Yeah. I had zero connection to any of these people. So it was kind of interesting to take a real outside look at it. And
what was your biggest challenge of the edit? And if you look back to was there any moments of episodes 1, 2, or 3 where you thought was the biggest challenge?
Episode 1 for sure, because it's a hard one because and episode 1 of all of these series is always the hardest and it's the hardest in anything. When you write a book, the first chapter is hardest because you have to lay out the background and all of the kind of assumptions that then drive the rest of the thing. You have the inciting incident and all these things that kind of drive it. And so, yeah, it was really challenging. I would say then there was this is gonna sound dramatic, but disconnect between you and I, not disconnect, there was no disagreement at all. Yeah. But you're like Illinois guy, and you want to tell this Illinois kid state all the way through, and I'm like, I don't know this stuff as much, and and so it's super important in keeping it in and putting the background of Tony Davis is this Tony Davis is this stud. He's undefeated for how many years?
8 years, something crazy.
And just dominating everyone. But then the story is also that he's not really working hard, and he's just kind of this cruising by on this natural talent. And so that was the hardest one to me. Episode 2 told itself. It. Episode 3, there were some challenges talking about all the wrestling matches that were in there and everything like that. But episode 1 was a difficult one, but it came out great. And I think it really, again, finding that balance between, like you said, the different voices, different people. There's different levels, right? There's someone that wrestled in Illinois and knows all these guys. And there's someone that wrestled but doesn't know these guys. And there's someone that wrestled and kind of knows them guy. And then there's someone that didn't wrestle at all. And so being able to placate all of those different listeners is something that I think that was the biggest challenge. That was the biggest challenge in this episode and this series and everything like that. So, and in everyone really, but I don't know, when someone tunes in to watch the Smiths, to listen to the Smiths, they know who John Smith is, and they're sold on it. They're going to listen to it, and you get a little more freedom because, like I said, that kind of that quirky stuff. If you had a scene where it was I'm just totally making this up right now, but if you were and then John Smith ate a Pop-Tart or something stupid like that, you could put that in because it'd be kind of funny. You'd be like, oh wow, I didn't know John Smith eats Pop-Tarts. Something like that. But this one we had to keep it really, really tight and really direct, and so that's why I think we were a little more or I was a little more critical and everything like that. And so
it's interesting because you need something to balance you out, because again, people think their world is everyone's world. And so if it was too much of the Illinois kid stuff, but not enough of that, it's just interesting balancing it all. And I agree. Anytime we start the beginning, it's how do you get all that exposition across and make people care, but also not bore them with details?
That's the biggest challenge. I would say that's one of the biggest challenges in all of storytelling across any medium is exposition, because you need to tell some of that stuff. You need exposition, but while weaving it in, and that's what a good like screenwriter in anything, they weave the exposition in. When you watch a movie, you see someone, they in the first scene they drop a line about their ex-wife, blah blah blah, and it's like they can't just say, "Oh, I'm divorced." They have to drop it in and everything like that. So it's kind of the challenge of it. And I guess like it's funny because we have this streamlined, not streamlined, I mean it's still tough, but like we've worked through these last episodes, whatever, in like a really efficient manner. We have a good system, whatever. What would you say, like from the beginning, and actually going back to Gable the Goat and Assembly Fall, and even before me, like how have you improved? Like how has the system changed for you over this time?
The big thing for me is focusing on mastering like the storytelling components and the themes that we all know about if you read some of these screenwriting books or hero's journey, that kind of stuff. Like really understanding just like the reoccurring themes that make good stories good has been something I focused a lot on. And like Gable the Goat Part 1, knew nothing about story, got kind of lucky that everyone just knows that person. Episode 2 I didn't think was that good. Assembly Fall is the first one I did where I was using some of these themes of like principles of writing or principles of storytelling, and then I felt good about that. And then the Smiths obviously used a lot of it. Slaying Saitiev, so on and so forth. This one really was trying to flesh out more of like the B and C stories and make sure those were solid and not just like use them as an afterthought. Because that was something I really tried to kind of work on that muscle here. So I would just say, keeping it like a story. Like everyone who comes up to me at tournaments or whatever, and they say, "Oh, I love this," or "I love that." It's like a story, it keeps you going, which is like, that's the most important thing to me. It shouldn't just be like a documentary or a bibliography. It should be like an up and down story from beginning to end.
That's one of my biggest things about when you watch some of these like documentaries or listen to them, and they're just kind of recounting the things that happen, but there's no dramatic tension and everything like that. Like that's definitely the biggest thing for me. And so being able to like keep that in there and while moving the story along and everything like that is great. And so which one of them, well, I'll just tell you my vote, like already. I would say which one is the most difficult. I think the Smiths was difficult just because of the complexity of it, because it wasn't the John Smith story, it was the Smiths. And so I remember that first episode, like that was like it was like, how do you're talking about Smith, John, and then you bring in like Pat, and then the whole thing, and it was quite complex. And that was, how many episodes was that? 7?
And we
7,
edited them all from the beginning of the first edit of episode 1 through episode 7 was all done within 30 days. And I don't know how that was possible, like looking back on it, because it just seems like it was massive. I think each one was different. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I didn't say anything.
I thought each one there was different parts of each one. Like Slaying Saitiev was tough because it was the first time a major character, I didn't interview him. Like I didn't interview Saitiev, and I didn't know if the voice narrator would work, but it turns out no one even thought twice about it. Like the voiceover, they just thought that's what actually, I think a lot of people just thought that was Saitiev. I really do. Like I don't think anyone noticed.
I just played it again, and at the very beginning, the first time he speaks, you said we have a voice actor here, which is one of my best friends, Vlad. But
I still can't believe that. I remember the Smiths. There was one part that I was really hung up on, and it was whether or not to break out the stuff with Leroy in 1984 into its own episode, which was the back half of episode 1.
Yeah, that was difficult. I remember that. There was a big right in the middle of episode 1, the episode totally changed gears, and it was really difficult there was not a good answer to it either, because
you had to tie the seeds of the Gable thing in early, because it would come back in episode 2 when Gable was John Smith's coach of the Goodwill Games, and that was his big breakthrough. And then in episode 3 when Randy Lewis was against John Smith. So, but those 3 episodes, I knew they would go in that order. And then I didn't know if I'd put John and the Cuban crisis before or after I introduced Pat. Like I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to put Pat in too late. So that was the complexity there. And this one, I would just say we kind of already talked about it, but I would just, one other thing that's come to me, the overarching part is that the key difference between audio docs and video docs is that you have to be way more choosy with who you put in the audio docs because you don't want to just introduce a random person and not have them the rest of the episode. So like,
this is something that we kind of figured out as we're doing this, because, you know, in a video documentary, you can have the person, you can see the person's face. So, you know, it's a new person. There's a lot of visual cues. You can put a bar across the bottom that says like his high school coach or whatever. You can take a little bit more liberties, but in this, you've had to really restrict to kind of like maximum 5 to 10 people in an episode, because otherwise it gets confusing who's speaking, who's this thing, and you can't always introduce every person, you know? Yeah,
exactly. And like, I don't think, like, I've watched The Last Dance so many times. There's a lot of people, like sports writers, that are used only for very specific sections that won't come up again the whole series, and you don't think twice about it in a video doc. Whereas with the audio doc, there are so many great one-liners that other people have said who I didn't put in because they don't have anything else to add to the episode, and someone else says it.
There's only one, Kyle Klingman. Kyle Klingman made it in for one line.
And there was, he had on the initial he was a big part of that section. Like, he had so much more in there. Like, that's another one where there's just tons of great stuff that, he was my guy for the era of the JUCO transfer. So there were two big scenes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, he's a real like wonky inside baseball kind of guy.
Yeah.
He knows everything about everything, right?
Everything. Yeah. So it's just, I don't know. I just was thinking about the biggest evolution. I would say that's it. Like, picking like the 3 to 4 people that you think are going to be the main storytellers, but then also interviewing another 15 people, because by the time you get to that main guy, like a TJ Williams or Reggie Wright, you want to have 3 to 4 other ones done that kind of inform you what that one's going to be like, you know? So there's so many people I interviewed.
You have that deep background. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. From like maybe a teammate or someone. And so there's a lot of people out there who don't go in them, and it's just like, they don't know how much they inform the story or the research for the next interviews, you know?
Yeah. Well, I feel like by the time you get to the story, like, you know everything there is to know about every angle. Sometimes I ask you about something that's not even in the documentary. It's like a separate thing that was a side story, and you know the whole side story. You know, you've gone down that street, you've come back, you've taken all the branches of that street, you've investigated every corner, every dead end, and you come back to the story, and you know all that stuff because it's just like the whole thing. And actually, do you know about Hemingway's iceberg theory?
Tell me about it.
Hemingway's iceberg theory is that, you know, you only see the small percentage of the iceberg above the water and the rest is below. And he says that as a writer, you only want to show the top part, but you have to know all the bottom part.
Right.
So he's like, you want to know all the stuff in your head, know everything there is to know about your characters, but you don't want to show it. And you show only the parts that you absolutely need to show.
I like
and
that.
The reader, or the listener in this case, will understand the rest. As long as you know it, even if you don't say it, it'll come through in the writing or in the speaking, I guess it is.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, because otherwise you're not going to be able to speak about it confidently if you don't do all that research underneath. You know, I really, when you say that, 2 things come into my mind. One is just like the whole Chechnya story of Saitiev. That was like a world where, like, the amount of stuff that we had to read just to even get to the point that, you know, of the part that everyone heard was a lot, you know, because that was really foreign to me, Chechnya and that whole world, you know. So was this inner city of Chicago, really. I mean, this is a lot of books on, like, you know, gang violence and just really dark stuff. Sometimes you're like, man, this is like kind of depressing what really goes on in some of these places. You know, it's like, it rubs off on you. Like Chechnya and like Southside Chicago are 2 places that I would never wish anyone to go to, like in a wartime, you know.
I just got chills, man. Think about the similarities between those stories and those places, man.
Bro.
Like, wow.
Dark. Yeah. Like, it's just, it's intense. And that's why the people that make it out are so interesting.
But isn't that like, that's amazing. You read a whole book and maybe one line comes in from that book. And this whole thing, I remember I read a whole book about, when I was writing my book about, you know, fighting MMA in Peru, I read a book about the history of Peru and the Spanish invasion, the conquest of the Incas, read this whole thing. And I kind of like, I went to Machu Picchu and I like explained in the first draft, I had the whole thing about the whole freaking history of the thing, and it all got cut out. And I don't think any of it was in there, but I again, the Iceberg thing, I think that it wouldn't have been as strong if I had not read that. I don't think anything made it in there, but
right.
It's that background of knowing that thing, and you can say things with more confidence, and you can know what it is, and you can actually take that step forward and moving.
Bro, it's funny you say that, because my next project's about this guy who defected from Iran. The first Iranian athletes ever to defect after the revolution. So this morning was like my first big day researching. I was watching interviews of like Ayatollah Khomeini, and I'm like, will this ever even be in there? Like, what am I doing with my life, bro? And I got 4 books to my right. It's like All the Shah's Men, The Shah, Khomeiniism. Like, I'm like, I don't.
Oh my God. I love this. I'm so in. I'm so in.
I love that stuff though. And I'm like, I'm convincing myself it's moving the story forward, but sometimes you're like, I don't know if it is, but obviously it all is.
Listen, if you need any Iranian voice actors, I got plenty.
Perfect.
I got plenty of Iranian friends.
Oh my God. Yeah, this will be
for background. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I love, again, you're a history guy. I love history. It's awesome. And so, okay, so that's the next project. You're announcing it. Have you?
Yeah.
It's is this the official announcement? What's the deal?
Official announcement. Yeah. And it's my dream is to direct a feature length documentary. And I've always said it's a 30 for 30. It doesn't have to be that, but like a feature length 90-minute sports doc is my dream. Right. So I've done 5 to 6 audio docs at this point. Done some video projects on the side, but this summer we're going to be doing our first short documentary film. It's going to be anywhere from 13 to 16 minutes. Yeah, I'm going to submit it in all the film festivals. So I'm going all in on it. I don't even think I'm going to edit it. I'm going to hire someone to edit it. But yeah, I think the filming is going to take place. So I'll just give you a quick synopsis.
Let's hear it.
So after the revolution in 79, there was just a lot of chaos in Iran. These 4 wrestlers who are on the Iranian national team defected in 1982. They're the first athletes to defect from Iran after the revolution. And, in Iran, wrestlers are like gods, right? So it was a big deal that like the national heroes defected. And they defected at this tournament in Venezuela. They got stuck in Venezuela for 6 months, that no one would take them in. They were living like basically homeless. So they decided to turn themselves back into the Iranian embassy. There was no direct flight from Iran. This
is I'm already hooked. This is like insane. Yeah.
So there's no direct flight from Venezuela to Iran. So they turn themselves back in. There's a public execution waiting for them when they get home. But the plane goes from Venezuela to Madrid, and they stop at the Madrid airport, get off, hide in the bathroom, and they ended up getting taken in by the Spanish government for 3 years. And then they ended up going to the US. But this whole story is like these 4 wrestlers did this. Meanwhile, back in Iran, their families are being interrogated. Their families are being imprisoned. Like it's just a crazy freaking story. So it's going to be a short film this summer. Can't wait, bro.
Oh my God. You told me this before. You've like kind of mentioned this to me before, but you never told me the detail on that level. I'm like, wow, that sounds incredible.
I've tightened up the pitch a lot in the past 2 weeks because I've been deep on it, or the past week because I've been into it. But yeah, man, like so one of the guys who defected, the main guy, he lives in Orange County. His sisters, he helped defect like 6 years later. They all live in Brussels. So they're having like a family reunion this June in Brussels. So I'm going there to interview the hero and his sisters. And then the other wrestler, bro, this other part of it, I forgot to tell you. The other wrestler who escaped, also super legit, like wrestled Dave Schultz in the US Open. In 1987, he's getting ready to make the U.S. Olympic team. The LAPD arrests him for selling heroin. He goes to jail. He is in jail during the Olympic trials. It comes to find out he's totally innocent. He sues the LAPD. They give him $3 million for false imprisonment and planting drugs on him. So then in 1998, he wins this $3 million settlement, goes to Nicaragua and becomes the president of the Nicaraguan Wrestling Federation and is still in Nicaragua today. So
what is happening? What
that's a 30 for 30. My mind. That's another 30 for 30. So I'm going to Nicaragua the first week of June to interview this guy.
So why Nicaragua? What?
He's convinced that. So he was wrestling.
I speak Spanish. Take me.
I would love to, bro. I need to. So in 1982 they get to Spain. 1985 they get to the U.S. both of these guys joined the Cal State Fullerton wrestling team, and they're like legit. So they're all Americans. And yeah, this guy's training for the Olympics. Fucking, he sells heroin to an undercover cop, claims he had no knowledge what was in the briefcase, and that an Iranian government official planted it on him. And I guess the planning was so obvious that a jury easily let him off. And yeah, he got awarded all this money for damages and for like being in jail during the Olympic trials and missing his dream. So then he went on to become the head coach at Cal State Fullerton, wins the settlement, moves to Nicaragua.
Why are you doing a video versus audio?
I think it's just time to make the jump, man. Like I would regret it if I didn't give myself a shot at making like a serious film. And when I say that, I mean like really playing out the story, just like I would for an audio doc, the same level of detail and story building. And I just want to have something else, just, flex that muscle. And I may never do a film project again, but it's just good to, get a new vehicle, kind of flex that muscle.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think that's super exciting. I think it's amazing. You can do a lot more. You have different constraints, right? Every medium has a different constraint, right?
Medium, that's what I was going for. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have, I guess every media, is it the plural? I don't know. Anyway, you can show a lot more, as we said before, you can show a lot more people, but then if you don't have video of something, you just have to show someone talking about it. So it's kind of the whole,
and then like a B-roll like photo or like news.
Yeah, B-roll. So all that stuff. You got to get a lot of footage. And is there did you choose this one specifically because there's more footage or anything like that, or was it just because it's time?
So this one I was actually going to do last fall, and after Slaying Saitiev, this is the first project I had in the queue to do this short film. Then called, the main guy's name's Reza. I've had him on the podcast, so I know his story and I know how amazing of a person he is. So I know him. And basically it was like still during COVID and we couldn't get his sisters to the US. And I wanted to do it when we could interview his sisters as well. So like last September, we agreed to push this off until this July. And so his whole family has been planning to get to Brussels this June, specifically for the filming of this project. So it's like a big family reunion. And I'm so excited, bro.
I'm so mad that I'm not going to be because I'm always in Europe. I'm always in Europe and I'm always like a flight away, an easy flight. I could just be there. And I'm so mad that I can't right now.
I thought we would meet at some point in Cheshire to do this. I was convinced we were going to get Saitiev, but
not right now. Not now.
Like, I mean, but back in the day.
I know. I have no desire to go to Russia right now. I want to go to the world, but I have no desire to go to Russia right now. So I always wanted to go to Chechnya and Dagestan, but
not now.
That's past. Yeah.
Those days are gone for a while. But so basically the filming will be done for this by mid-July. I'll transcribe everything by mid-August, write the script. The script will be done by like end of September. Then I'll ship it off. I think I'm going to have this edited just because like if you look at any legit sports doc, the director never edits himself. It's just like it's its own skill. So better time than ever to practice working with an editor. So I think I'm going to have someone else edit it. I may change my mind, but the reason I'm not editing it myself is that I would have to buy like a $6,000 computer to be able to handle this much footage. Like my MacBook barely handles Premiere Pro.
Really?
Bro.
No, but anyway, I agree with you. Like a professional editor, they do things that you and I don't know, couldn't even imagine,
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see that new transition into that separate new media or whatever. But
but then right after that it'll be back to an audio doc. So there'll be another audio doc before I would think, hopefully we'll release it like next February so that we can promote it at the NCAAs.
That'll be sick. And one thing I want to ask you this before we're kind of wrapping up here, but one thing I want to ask you before that I never got around to was talk about the responses you've got from the people that you've done these audio documentaries about. Brandon Slay, John Smith, Pat Smith, Tony Davis. Like, I think this is the coolest thing because I think it's the biggest challenge is really telling someone's story truthfully and really capturing the essence of it and doing it justice while, like showing the good and the bad and everything like that. And so like, talk about the response you've gotten from these people.
Yeah. And that's why I admire these people so much for telling their stories, because we're going to strip them down and make them human. And however we do that may not always be the most flattering. And, they trust us to tell the story honestly. So everyone we've done it on, most recently, Tony, you know, I got a voicemail. Tony listened to the doc. I called him back. He was like, I was blown away. Like, this will be something I can share with my kids and my grandkids, you know? So,
oh my God, that's so cool.
And like Pat Smith said the same thing. Like, that's always a theme. It's like, I'll have this to show my kids of what it was really like going through all this, because how often do you get to hear what all your best friends and coaches think about your accomplishments? Like, never. We're always kind of wondering, what do people think about us? Right. So
yeah.
Everyone, you know, Brandon and obviously Coach Sean Smith, you know, I probably talked to him the least after the interviews as anyone, just because he's so busy, which, like, I read that the director of Last Dance has never spoke to Michael Jordan since those interviews. So it's not all that surprising, but everyone at the time of release has been just so excited that we were able to get into the nuts and bolts as much as we did, but also keep the story moving, you know, like keep it building and keep it turning. So the response from these people has been unbelievable. And again, it's like, as we're doing this, I'm thinking Tony Davis is going to hate me after this. Like, he's going to be so angry because we're going too deep here. Or I thought the same thing about John Smith when we were talking about the Cuban stuff. Like, he's not going to want to share all this. So it's just always relieving to hear that they enjoy it. And, appreciate all the work that goes into it, because it's crazy.
Yeah, I saw Brandon Slay I don't know, a few months ago, and I told him, you know, I was like, how would you think it? And he was so complimentary. He was saying, I was so thankful that you told my story right, and that you really did all the hit on all the cylinders and everything like that. And it was cool. It was really cool. It was it's nice to hear that. And I think, like, who wouldn't want that? I mean, like, who out there wouldn't want someone to interview? Well, maybe some people, you know,
right?
But it's cool to be able to tell these stories. And, you know, like the story of Tony Davis is such a redemption story. You know, he had there's warts, he had a criminal past and everything like that, but then it's really a happy story. It's a really happy ending. He succeeded. He graduated from college. He became a high school teacher, and he's like recognized by the state of North Carolina, I think it was. And it's a success story. It's a story. I think I told you this, but like, I think every Beat the Streets organization should show that story to people, you know, like, because it's about a guy that was involved in gang violence, but like superseded it by his wrestling career, by dedicating himself to something like that. And so it's really powerful.
As you said it, I was thinking it is a happy story, and it's a redemption story, because it could have gone the other way. And like, as I'm sitting here thinking, though, it's like, we've never done a story on one where it doesn't work out. And most 30 for 30s, it doesn't work out in the end. Like, the guy, you know, doesn't get his shit together, or the guy doesn't win the Olympics against the Russian. So now that I'm hearing that, I'm thinking maybe the story needs to be told, but the guy doesn't. Maybe a
really depressing story, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, but usually those stories about someone that cheated or did some wacky thing that didn't work out, and like, I don't know. You know? Yeah. So maybe we'll get to one of those one day, but I hope
we know who we're hoping for next. I can't believe he's been on this podcast. I totally forgot that. Like, that's so embarrassing to forget that. Like, that episode was kind of like a weird one. I shouldn't even have been on the episode. I was like a fly on the wall. As these Olympians are.
For the listener, who are we talking about right now?
Talking about DC. Yeah, because we had the episode where Guerrero, Jamil Kelly, and DC, a couple of Olympians are on here having water cooler talk, and I'm like, the dorky podcaster in the background, I'm like, what am I even doing here? Like, shut up and go on mute.
You're the fourth wheel there.
Dude. Like, I don't even want to chime in. I'm like, what am I going to say to this? Like, it's like, you have nothing to even add. So other than that, though, that would be a great one. I just think so many people, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, so many people love DC. So that'd be a great one. And his story is unbelievable. You know, like I was telling you, kind of the criteria for a story that I heard from the guy who did The U, which is Billy Corbin. He also did Cocaine Cowboys. He's done a ton of documentaries.
You've spoken with him.
Spoken with him. Yeah, briefly through email. He his rule is, though, it's called RAS, Relevance Access Story. So like, how relevant's the story? how much access do you have? Like, is there a lot of archival? Are the people willing to meet? You know, sometimes like the main character won't ever meet with you. And then story, like, it's not only like, is it a good story, but why are you uniquely qualified to tell this story? So,
wow. Yeah.
So like, I love that criteria. And, you know, these wrestling ones, I'm comparing it to like, why are we more qualified than Jason Aaron did The Last Stand? So it's like, well, we know the wrestling world and like what DC came through better than you. Like, I'm sorry, like, we're better qualified to tell that story, even though you did.
For sure. Yeah.
So I think about that. And so a couple stories hit that, you know, a couple topics hit that criteria for me. That would be amazing audio docs that will be up next. So there's a bunch of, not a bunch, but there's like 3 to 4 that would just be unbelievable for that. So
what are they?
Yep. So I would love to tell the DC story. I'd love to tell the Sergey story. I would also love to tell Kevin Jackson through either the angle of like his rivalry with Royce Alger, which that's very hyper wrestling. So maybe not.
Yeah, I didn't even know, but like I know Kevin Jackson and Royce Alger, but I didn't know the details of that. Yeah.
Massive rivalry, dating, and like not even like a hated one, but they wrestled like 10 times. Royce beat Kevin in the finals of the NCAAs, and then Kevin took Royce off the Olympic team. So, and they traveled together in Russia, and, you know, Royce is a wild man and all that kind of shit, you know? So there's
we all know that.
We love that. So that people have been calling for a Royce Alger documentary since I've started this podcast.
I would listen to that.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know, you've done all these projects, and like I said before, they're so, I mean, they're so intense, they're so time consuming, you're so dedicated to them, and you're so invested in all this stuff. Like, what is it like when you finish? You know, I don't know. For me, when I finish a project, I kind of feel a little bit empty, especially when you're so consumed in something that is like almost like you're losing yourself a little bit. What's it like when you finish?
It's definitely a change, because in your mind, like any spare moment you have over the last 7 months has been living in this world of what it's been like for this other person, what the story is going to look like. So you definitely feel a little empty. I would say I've gotten better at planning for it though. So like after the Smiths, I had no idea what the next story was going to be, and I had no idea when it would be. So that was a really big shift, because that was a massive project. After Slaying Saitiev, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but wasn't lined up. This story's been lined up. These interviews have been booked for this June since like last September. So like it feels a lot better knowing what's next. But even still, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I was just lazy, sleeping in, eating junk food all day. This time I developed an Oreo bender. I ate 3 full packs of Oreos consecutive days. Like maybe I would have like back in the day gone out like drinking all night. Now I'm like to the point in my life where I'm just eating Oreos. So like my fiance came home and she's like, "Are you literally going to eat a 3rd full pack of Oreos 3 days in a row?" I'm like, "Yes." And that was my downward spiral after this. But I got back on the workout train on Thursday and eating healthy again. I'm back to the basics. And, you know, this is Monday morning. So it's been a week. It feels good to be back on, like getting up early, spending the first 4 hours of the day researching for a documentary. So it feels normal again.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's much worse vices than Oreos, but I know you're a healthy guy. You're a guy who keeps a nice diet, keeps regimented and everything like that. So for you, that's off the wagon there. But
normally I go Monday through Friday, eating clean, intermittent fasting till noon, working out 5 days a week. I'm known every Friday. I always order a pizza if I'm at home. So like Friday through Sunday, it's fucking chaos.
Chicago pizza? What, Lou Malnati's or what?
Lou Malnati's. It can be Chicago style. And my order's gotten crazy over time, but now it's like Caesar salad, Lou's, thin crust, and maybe a Sprite, maybe a chocolate chip cookie. So I go hard on the dessert day. And when I'm not in discipline, when I'm not in structure, I lose that. And I just go freaking like a kid after a weigh-ins, eating like a freaking animal. So I was like getting empanadas at like 3 PM. I was off the rails. So yeah, my off the rails now in life
that's
food.
Off your rails.
It's all food related. Yeah.
You're going crazy, man. Don't keep it under control, man. I know, once you get too crazy there.
I know,
right? But anyway, yeah, man, this was so much fun to, we spent so much time on this episode working through it, all the nitty gritty in the last few, all of them. And it's so fun just to come on and shoot the shit and talk about this stuff.
We got to do it every one from here on out, because so many of the times we talk, I wish it was I wish it was a documentary, because it's not a documentary, but a podcast, because I think it would be interesting to hear how we come up with what scenes go in and what go out in the order of things. So yeah, we'll do this every time from now on. And it was good to have you come on here so prepared to ask me questions, because this is the only podcast I've done in years where I didn't do any prep. So I'm excited that it went smooth, and it's been good, man, to talk through it and flush some of these ideas out. It's good closure for us to move on. You're going to be starting your summer job, and I'm going to be working on this new project. So good closure for sure.
Yeah, well, I look forward to the next project, and
you're gonna love the Iranian history stuff. You're gonna freaking.
I mean, from a history, you had me with all the talk there. But Venezuela, you got Venezuela, Spain, everything like that. I'm in. Nicaragua's in there too. What? Come on.
Yeah,
come on.
So,
you know what I like, and that's
LAPD,
that's right there.
Drug plants, dude. I'm telling you, there's so much in this story. I'm excited, but I digress, man. Good to chat with you again, brother, and thanks so much for coming on.
You too, man. Thank you.
Hey guys, if you're looking to order custom team apparel for this freestyle and Greco season, look at SpartanCombat.com. They're running a special right now on custom team apparel, whether it's for Fargo, the NHSCA duels, or your freestyle and Greco state. Please consider Spartan Combat. Go to SpartanCombat.com to place your order. Com 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 to place.